Come into this place with your whole self, the parts that are raw and exposed, the part that is beaming with joy, the part that is seeking truth, the new, the possibility. Come into this place, open your heart, lay down your burden, lift up your hope for something new to happen. Come into this place with fellow travelers on the journey. Some faces new and others familiar, and all welcoming you here, now, to this moment. Come, let us worship together. The religious mystics of every tradition tell us union is what we are here for. Union is what we are. We are connected to each other, to the earth, to everything that exists, and to the force that lies beyond it all. Only most of the time we don't realize it. Union is not a myth or a pipe dream. The mystics say it is our true nature. Buddhists speak of interbeing, the connectedness of all that is. Our Unitarian Universalist tradition gives us the beautiful language of the interconnected web of all existence, of which we are a part. Most of the time we feel separate, but connected is what we are to others, to the whole of creation, to the energies moving in all things. Our sexuality helps us know that not just with our intellects, but with our total self. When it is loving and respectful and playful, sexual connection between human beings is a witness to that truth of connection and union. It mirrors and teaches us about our connection to the divine. The mystics tell us human beings simply can't handle fully experiencing our connection to the holy. They tell us we are not just loved at every moment, but we are connected at every moment to the holy, to the creative mystery, to energy. Call it what you will. This is not about believing in God or not. It's about energy that moves through the entire universe in ways that are beyond our understanding. It's about that energy that moves through the entire universe and breathes through us at every moment. And one of the best words we have to describe that energy, which can never be fully explained or understood, is love. The mystics tell us this love, this energy is always with us, but it's so powerful that we cannot handle being fully aware of it all of the time. It's too much. It's too overwhelming. And yet we can receive it filtered through another person. So we can become vessels of divine love for each other, not just with our hearts, but with these bodies. That's why our sexuality is so profoundly connected to our spiritual life. It helps us to feel our longing for connection and love and union, and if for only a moment to know that the reality that connection and love and union are what we are, not just what we long for.
Beyond all other gifts is this best gift alone to mortals given, the love of parent, lover, friend, attunes our hearts to bliss of heaven. Faith, hope, and love here come alive. Life's deepest treasure is made known when in forgiving, giving all inseparably two are as one.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Oh, that's so nice. Right now, the light in my neighborhood is igniting. You may know what I mean. The deciduous trees, poplars and maples, aspens, cottonwoods, the ornamentals with their glowing, inedible fruits, seem saturated in light at the early and late hours of the day. It feels less like a natural phenomenon to me and more like a spiritual state of being, the Earth's tilted orientation to the sun, at least where we are situated on the globe, and the accompanying lessening of the overall amount of light, as well as the relief that I feel from the intense heat of the just past summer, all make an atmosphere that calls to me to take it in, to notice, to attend to its every particular. It's what I have called in one poem, this last ecstasy of noticing. There's language in the Bible about the autumn. It has to do with harvest and the work to be done, the good servant who's prepared for that work, and the metaphorical notion of the seed that at harvest falls into the earth and dies in order to live again. Now you may ask, why should I care about what a traditional sacred discourse has to say about weather, this season that will pass before it can be fully registered? And of course, you don't have to care about this particular little eddy of discourse. The language from that tradition matters to me because it's for me, one of the keys to the sacred. And the sacred, the language for the sacred, is a portal for me, for designating respect for the divine that inheres in everything. And language is a tool for paying attention to this. And for me, the languages of the sacred have special power to do that. In an interview published recently in Eco-Theo Review with the poet Li Yan Li, he was asked, do you think that poetry can be a form of religion too, another form of the word? And he replied, I do. And I once believed that poetry was synonymous with the word, that the practice of poetry was nothing less than a practice of the logos, that the logic of poetry was the logic of God. But while I still believe that poetry can become a form of religion, I don't feel it is a true religion, marked as it is by obsession, personal ambition, competitiveness, rivalry, and other symptoms of enslavement, while a true religion is characterized by liberation. One could practice poetry as a practice of the word, the Tao, the logic of God, a practice of the word made flesh, but I see now that one could also religiously practice poetry as a practice of words, the practice of words made more words. Poetry, I've come to see, is not necessarily in and of itself the highest or deepest or most meaningful destiny of words. A poem might possibly be that, but not inevitably. Meanwhile, I'm interested in the most meaningful and deepest destiny of language, and I don't believe such a destiny lies in more language. A poem that inspires others to write more poems, a poem that gives rise to hundreds and even thousands of other poems is a poor second to a poem or any work of art that inspires even one person to change his or her life, to turn toward greater meaning, or the quest for greater meaning. This rings true to me as a poet, but also as a human being who is struggling to learn at this late date what I am to do with my gifts, my capacities, my opportunities, in light of what this world puts before me. Once I wrote a poem that a colleague helped me to understand was a psalm called Leaf and Wing, and I'm going to read that poem to you. I walk into the morning, each color having its way in a sky, the picture of sky, washed in a powder of brightness, a dog eddying behind me, surging ahead. My muscles bunch and relax in turn, the day itself the mercy I have cried for in the night, begging refuge from my own skin that I may hold. And unsought, a bush burns. Quail flush up as we near them. This colloquy with the dog, his muscular insistence, the answer to no question I recall, yet into radiance I move forward. Light coruscates, quivers in the plum tree's yellow fruit, and I shield my eyes. I'm in the world, I praise it. Birds scatter at my footfall, and if I am unwilling to step into fire, if I refuse to be a bearer or hearer of messages to be overtaken, may I not still be a sound woman with dog? May I not stride on an autumn street, tree buried, leaf strewn? May I not for once forget you, after all? Voice in each branch, so glittering, so distinct. Or if I must hear this knock, let it be, as I breathe all night, the miracle of my body doing the thinking for me. I never asked for a bush to burn, but it burns. Nor you, messenger, alighting on a hand I hadn't thought I'd outstretched. The beauty we find in the world without even asking for it is grace, in that its tremendous radiance must be unsought. It overtakes any dream we might have of speaking it into being. In this poem, I was working out, I think, the way the numinous insists, even when we don't ask for it, even when we've rejected it. I saw the light, the luminous world is overwhelming. I never asked for a bush to burn, but it burns. Anymore, though, beauty alone or one's encounters with that beauty don't seem to me like a sufficient response or conception of what the world presents to us, of what requires a response from us. In a poem, From Blossoms, Li Young-Lee summons up a quietly ecstatic world. From blossoms comes this brown bag of peaches we bought from the boy at the bend in the road where we turned toward signs painted peaches. From laden boughs, from hands, from sweet fellowship in the bins, comes nectar at the roadside, succulent peaches we devour, dusty skin and all. Comes the familiar dust of summer, dust we eat. Oh, to take what we love inside, to carry within us an orchard, to eat not only the skin but the shade, not only the sugar but the days, to hold the fruit in our hands, adore it, then bite into the round jubilance of peach. There are days we live as if death were nowhere in the background, from joy to joy to joy, from wing to wing, from blossom to blossom to impossible blossom, to sweet impossible blossom. There are days like this, yes, but there are also days and whole seasons and even what feel like whole lifetimes when the joys feel thin on the ground, or even when our own joys taste like dust to us, when we take in the suffering of others. We may seek to avoid the numinous, but the terrible is always there too, and we are, willing or unwilling, witness. It can become a habit to seek to avoid experience with what calls out for mercy in this world. I'm speaking to myself here. I catch myself turning the radio off when the news reports seem too much to bear, flipping the page, or changing the screen when I feel I can't take in what's there without devastation. The word ecstasy comes from a Greek word ekstasis that means entrancement, astonishment, and insanity, and a displacement or removal from a proper place. In the New Testament, it might mean a trance, from existani, to displace or put out of place, also to drive out of one's mind. Beauty and horror Both may provoke this outside of oneself feeling. I have found myself provoked to an other bodily state by great beauty, by terrible sadness, by horror at our world, at even second and third remove. To see is to risk being taken out of ourselves in a way that is disorienting. Our witness makes compassion possible, the feeling with the other, the joy and terror alike. There are two texts in my own spiritual traditions, neither of which I am actively a part of anymore, but which still speak to me. One is from the Gospel of Matthew in the New Testament that talks about the sparrow's fall. Are not 2 sparrows sold for a farthing, and one of them shall not fall on the ground without your Father? The very hairs of your head are all numbered. The other is a sermon from a Mormon scriptural text in which a prophet tells the people that to become a disciple of Christ means being willing to mourn with those that mourn and comfort those that stand in need of comfort. I can mark as well as you how these spiritual traditions, as instantiated into religious traditions, have failed their own ideals, just as I can mark my own failures in the same regard. I can also count the ways that these words and ideas continue to breathe, to constitute an atmosphere for me. What I carry with me from these words, or try to, is that ethic of attention, of caring for the least of these, the powerless, the vulnerable. A religious practice may fail at its own highest aim, and if the evidence before us means anything, it probably will, and repeatedly. But that aim, the hope that a practice can turn us to seek the good, to notice the aching heart and those who are carrying the great burdens of poverty, violence, and worse, that aim seems worth sustaining, and it seems worth seeking language that is adequate to it, so that we can speak to each other, however imperfectly, about it, so that we can attend to it. Let me close with 3 points from 3 different sources. Simone Weil wrote in the published First and Last Notebooks that attention is the rarest and purest form of generosity. I came upon Weil's statement about attention via Robert Hass, the American poet, who noted that attention is prayer, as Simone Weil said, and form in art is the way attention comes to life. I'm not sure I would agree with his choice of article there, rather than the way attention comes to life. I would amend that statement to say that form in art is one way attention comes to life. But back to Weil. Here's what she said in Gravity and Grace, which is, you may know this, I did not, a posthumous collection taken from her notebooks, which Weil entrusted to a farmer. Here's what she said. Attention, taken to its highest degree, is the same thing as prayer. It presupposes faith and love. Absolutely unmixed attention is prayer. I find this juxtaposition of attention and prayer to be powerful. As a poet, I often look at the etymologies of words to see where their roots are and what other words are a part of their ancient DNA. Prayer as a noun has as its most immediate ancient antecedent the Old French prière, prayer, petition, request, from about 1300. This word comes from medieval Latin precaria. Notice that that's probably the same word as precarious. Petition or prayer, and it comes from the Proto-Indo-European root prig, to ask or entreat. Attention, on the other hand, comes from the late 14th century, giving heed and active direction of the mind upon some object or topic, also from the Old French, which comes directly from the Latin attentionem, a noun of action, which comes from the past participle stem, and how it's so grammary, of attendere, to give heed to, more literally to stretch toward. Its Proto-Indo-European root is ten, to stretch. In that stretching, I see a gesture, a reaching toward. Poet and literary critic Susan M. Schultz, in an essay titled Poetry as Attention, published in the Journal of Poetics Research, recounts this story. My nearly 17-year-old son, Sangha, came home the next day, or the other day. Some days he hardly says a word. Other days he overwhelms me with the baseball highlights we both love. This day he said he'd met a really nice homeless guy at the bus stop. The guy told him someone had dropped off rubber slippers, flip-flops, for him, but he left them behind. He didn't need them, as he could walk just as easily barefoot. In a city with exploding homeless problems, in a city where million-dollar condos are going up like mushrooms, in a city where BMWs drive by homeless encampments, that statement contains a politics. Its politics is either ironic or it's pointed, but it's also true. Who among us needs much? That's what the conversation between him and my son was about. It is not a poem. I read it the way I read poems. Finally, the poet Mary Oliver wrote in Our World of what her longtime life partner taught her about attention. It has frequently been remarked about my own writings that I emphasize the notion of attention. This began simply enough to see that the way the flicker flies is greatly different from the way the swallow plays in the golden air of the summer. It was my pleasure to notice such things. It was a good first step. But later, watching M when she was taking photographs, and watching her in the darkroom, and no less watching the intensity and openness with which she dealt with friends and strangers too, taught me what real attention is about. Attention without feeling, I began to learn, is only a report. And openness and empathy was necessary if the attention was to matter. I am no hero of noticing or of attention. In fact, I don't think most of us are heroic in that regard. These days, I try to think of everything as a practice. What we do because we believe it is right, because it somehow improves things, gives an order to how we organize experience, because it helps us to do and be better. Noticing, paying attention is a practice. I believe it is prerequisite to compassion. Our attention can become a form of devotion, of reaching out to a suffering world, of lending our eyes, our voices, our words, our hands.